The morning sun pierced through the glass walls of Grand Enterprises Tower, draping golden streaks across a city that bowed, unknowingly, to the man standing 45 stories above it. Maxwell Grant didn't blink. His steel-gray eyes scanned the Manhattan skyline as if assessing its value, cataloging its vulnerabilities. Behind him, the hum of productivity echoed from the open concept office floor, phones ringing, keys clacking, voices murmuring in sync. But Maxwell stood still, his reflection cold and sharp in the floor-to-ceiling glass. As though even the light was hesitant to touch him, the world saw a billionaire visionary, a self-made empire builder, the man who turned a software firm into a global tech dynasty before his 40th birthday. What they never saw, what no camera could capture, was the silence that clung to him like a second skin. Not loneliness exactly, but something deeper, emptier. "Mr. Grant," said a voice, crisp, professional, but softened by years of familiarity. He turned. Victoria Chen stood in the doorway, tablet in hand, immaculate as always, 20 years by his side, and still, she never missed a shift in his tone or the slight downturn of his mouth. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "Your 9 o'clock was canceled. The Tokyo investors are waiting on your afternoon deadline." Maxwell gave a curt nod. "Tell them we're in, and reschedule the afternoon budget review. I want to go over the European numbers myself." Victoria made the note swiftly, then hesitated, a flicker, small but telling. "What else?" he asked. "The charity committee sent over the quarterly event list." She swiped through her screen. "There's a new addition. Riverdale Home for Children small fundraiser, this Thursday. They're requesting your presence. Not just a donation." He sighed quietly, his expression hardening. "I've already committed to 5 events this quarter. The board believes this one would help, considering the fallout from the outsourcing headlines last month." She met his gaze. It would send a message. He turned back to the window. Outside, the world glittered, fast-moving, obedient. Inside, his memory conjured a quieter scene: gray walls, creaky beds, a mail tray with stale bread, a boy sitting alone with a book held tightly in his hands. Maxwell shook the image off like dust from an old coat. "Fine. 2 hours. No. Photos." The Riverdale Home for Children sat on a quiet street lined with trees that had grown indifferent to the city's noise. Maxwell arrived in a sleek black car that didn't belong there. His tailored suit caught curious glances as he entered the building, the linoleum floors groaning under his polished shoes. Inside, the air smelled faintly of crayons, dust, and effort. He stayed near the back, nodding stiffly at introductions, sipping untouched mineral water. Children played in clusters. Adults tried to blend kindness with hope. Maxwell's presence was clearly unexpected. He saw it in the way shoulders straightened, voices dropped, and eyes flicked toward him. Still, he said little until he saw them. For kids sat apart from the others, not siblings by blood but by circumstance. A weary boy with a too-old gaze. A girl tapping furiously at a tablet she clearly wasn't supposed to have. A quiet boy drawing on his arm with a marker. And a small girl spinning slowly in a circle, singing to herself. He didn't know what made him stop. Maybe it was the way they weren't trying, not smiling for prospective parents, not looking up when adults passed, as if they'd already learned. That disappointment hurt less when you didn't hope. The boy with the too old eyes looked up. "You look like you used to be sad, too," he said. Maxwell froze. The voice wasn't accusing. It wasn't even curious. It was quiet, certain, like the boy wasn't guessing. He knew. Maxwell's throat went dry. For a split second, he saw himself not as he was, but as he had once been. A child in a state-run shelter, a number on a file, a boy no one came for. He blinked. "What's your name?" he asked. The boy stood, calm and unblinking. "Daniel." Maxwell nodded once, said nothing more, but something had shifted in his chest. A slow, quiet cracking, the kind that comes just before a dam begins to break. The weeks had passed since the Riverdale fundraiser, but the moment hadn't left Maxwell. It haunted him, quiet and persistent, like a song he couldn't stop hearing. Daniel's words, "You look like you used to be sad," clung to him more than the headlines, more than the boardroom fires he put out daily. Maxwell hadn't intended to return. He'd done his part, shaken hands, written the check, nodded at the cameras. But something, the way Daniel's eyes didn't blink, the way Zoe spun through the crowd as if her chaos was armor something, had wormed its way into the still, armored corridors of his soul. He was back in his penthouse office late one evening, the skyline cloaked in rain and shadow, when he asked the question that startled even Victoria. What would it take to adopt them? She didn't look up from her tablet at first. Sorry, who? The for children, he said, voice low but serious. Riverdale, the ones nobody wanted. Victoria paused, her stylus still against the screen. All four. He looked at her, and something in his eyes, something tired, something desperate told her he wasn't asking to be charitable. He was asking to be human. I'll make the calls, she said softly. The adoption was fast-tracked. Money does that. But money couldn't erase doubt, and doubt haunted every corner of Grant's otherwise pristine world. His penthouse transformed overnight from sterile steel and marble to a battlefield of mismatched blankets, juice spills, and chaos. Ava hacked into the elevator access system within 3 days. Not maliciously, just to see if she could. She was 9, whip smart, and spoke like someone who read dictionaries for fun. Malik, 8 and painfully quiet, filled sketch pads with surreal, detailed drawings, burning houses, people with no faces, a boy curled under a staircase. Zoe was a storm in a 227, volatile, fiercely defiant, screaming one moment, hugging the next. And Daniel said little. He simply watched. Maxwell had no idea what he was doing. He tried to parent the way he did business with spreadsheets, schedules, consequences. But the children didn't follow rules. They followed pain, and they tested him every hour of every day, trying to see when he would break. One night, Zoe shattered a crystal bowl from Shanghai, a family heirloom. She didn't flinch. She just looked at him, daring him to yell. Maxwell didn't. He simply bent down and started picking up the pieces. You're not gonna send me back, she whispered. He froze. Is that what you think I'd do? She shrugged, hugging her knees. Everyone does. He sat on the cold marble floor beside her, the pieces of broken glass glinting around them like sharp confessions. He didn't say anything. He didn't know how, but he stayed. Weeks passed. Then came the incident. A gala dinner at the Grant estate. Politicians, celebrities, investors, the usual elite crowd. Maxwell insisted the children be introduced against Victoria's cautious warnings. It was a disaster. Ava corrected a senator's math on a national policy speech in public. Malik drew a grotesque caricature of a top investor on the back of the menu. Zoe dumped an entire glass of juice into a woman's designer purse because she called her adorable. And Daniel, the quiet one, stood at the piano and recited a poem he had written about abandonment, about how men build towers to feel taller, because no one ever bent down to love the child they used to be. The room went silent. Maxwell didn't say a word, not during the ride home, not when the boredom mailed him, not when the press ran headlines the next morning. Billionaire's orphan experiment backfires. But later that night, long after the children had gone to bed, he walked into Daniel's room. You knew exactly what you were doing, Maxwell said. Daniel looked up from his notebook. You needed them to see you. Maxwell stared at him, stunned. Daniel's voice was calm, even. They don't know who you were, but I think I do. And for the first time in Maxwell Grant's adult life, he didn't feel powerful. He felt seen. That night, Victoria opened an old security file hidden deep in the company servers. Maxwell's sealed juvenile record. There, in a single line, was the truth. Name at time of admission, Max Evans, age 11. Entered state care after fire destroyed home. No known parents. File closed cause of fire. Suspicious. Victoria sat back, trembling. She had known Maxwell Grant, but she had never met Max Evans. The sun hung low over the Hamptons estate like a tired witness. Summer rolled in with its fake smiles and polished lawns, and for the first time in decades, the Grant family estate was alive with children. Laughter echoed off the marble walls, mixed with occasional screaming, door slams, and the unmistakable sound of someone using a shampoo bottle as a microphone. Maxwell Grant hated it. He told himself it was because of the disruption to his schedule, the unpredictability, the broken art piece, the fingerprints on his Steinway. But deep down, the truth was more raw. Their chaos made him feel seen, and he didn't know how to live with that. Victoria, ever watchful, had arranged the retreat 3 days away from Manhattan, away from the flashing cameras and whispering investors. You need to connect, she had said. Maxwell had laughed, with for ticking time bombs. But he came, and they came, and now the once holy halls of Grant prestige were overrun with rebellion. Ava had turned the library into a command center, installing a whiteboard and a network of tablets to run her spy surveillance program. Malik set up an art studio in the wine cellar and began sketching scenes no one could understand. A boy standing in fire, a staircase leading into darkness, a man whose face was split in half. Zoe was everywhere, screaming at the ocean, climbing onto the roof, cutting her pancakes into perfect squares and refusing to eat them if they were uneven. And Daniel was watching again, always watching, writing, waiting. Maxwell spent most of the first day pacing the private balcony, trying to convince himself this was growth, family, normalcy. But that illusion shattered on the second night. It started with a thunderstorm. The sky cracked open around midnight, lightning turning the estate's glass walls into momentary mirrors. Somewhere down the hall, something crashed, then a scream. Maxwell bolted from his study, barefoot, heart hammering. He found Malik curled in the corner of his room, shaking. The boy's sketchpad lay torn open on the floor, a ruined drawing of a burning building drenched in tears. Maxwell froze. "I didn't mean to," Malik whispered. "I just wanted to make it go away." "Make what go away?" Maxwell asked, kneeling beside him. Malik's lip trembled. "The fire, the one I saw in my dreams. It's always there. I think it's your house." Maxwell's breath caught. "How do you know that?" "I drew it before I ever saw it," Malik whispered, looking up with eyes that didn't belong to an 8-year-old. "But it's real. I know it is. You were in it, and someone else died." Maxwell stood slowly, his skin crawling. He walked out of the room, down the hallway, and into the old study. Rain tapped at the windows. The lights flickered. He opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside was a box, scorched on one side. Inside that, a photograph, burned at the edges, of 2 boys standing in front of a foster home. One smiling, one stone-faced, and a name. Ethan. The boy who never made it out of the fire. Maxwell clutched the photo until his knuckles went white. He hadn't spoken that name in 30 years. Outside, thunder rolled again. The next morning, the storm passed. But inside the house, something else was brewing. Ava had been caught hacking into the Wi-Fi and streaming footage from a drone she built. Zoe locked herself in the bathroom and refused to come out until someone told her where her real mommy was buried. Daniel, as always, just wrote. Until lunch. The kids were gathered at the massive dining table, awkward, forced, silent. Maxwell arrived late, exhausted. He sat, forced a smile, and attempted something resembling grace. Zoe kicked her chair and said flatly, "Do you even know our birthdays?" Maxwell blinked. The silence after was a dagger. "You don't," Ava muttered. "You bought us like property, but you never actually looked." "I didn't buy you," he said quietly. Daniel looked up from his notebook. "Then why do we still feel like guests in your museum?" Maxwell stood, voice rising. "I gave you everything. You gave us a roof," Daniel said, "not a home." The rage hit him before he could stop it. "You think I owe you something?" he snapped. "You think I don't know what it's like to sleep on the floor and beg for attention? I earned everything. I have everything. I climbed out of hell to get here, and I won't be dragged back down by for broken children who don't even want to be saved." The silence afterward was louder than the storm had been. Zoe's lower lip trembled. Ava's eyes narrowed. Malik stood and quietly walked out of the room, but Daniel just stared. And then he said, calm as ever, "We didn't ask you to save us. We just hoped you'd stay." Maxwell didn't speak. He left. That night, the children were gone. They left. A note on his bed written in Daniel's handwriting, signed by all 4. "You said no one ever picked us, but we picked you. We just thought you'd see it." The mansion had never been quieter, for a house built on silenced glass, stone, and the illusion of peace. This silence was different. It was not stillness. It was absence. The echo of Zoe's unpredictable laughter, Ava's sharp questions, the faint tapping of Malik's pencil, Daniel's low voice reading poetry aloud to no one but the walls. All of it was gone. Maxwell stood in the hallway outside their empty rooms, each door half open like a wound. The note they left lay unfolded in his hand, the edges crumpled. From how tightly he gripped it. "We picked you." That line seared through him more than any accusation ever had. He didn't call the police. He told himself. It was because the children were smart to get into danger. They left on purpose. They left him, but the truth clawed at his gut. What if they'd run away from something? From him? Victoria returned late that night from the Manhattan office, carrying a briefcase full of updates and reports, none of which Maxwell acknowledged. "I don't need investors right now," he muttered, pacing the grand hallway, voice hoarse from yelling into silence. "You don't need your company," she said softly. "You need your children." He stopped, turned. "They're not mine," he said bitterly. "I thought I could fix something, right or wrong, but I can't fix this." Victoria narrowed her eyes. "What wrong were you trying to right, Max?" He didn't answer, just walked away. But she didn't stop asking. The next morning, Victoria unlocked the digital safe only the people in the world had access to. Inside was a folder she had never dared open before. It was labeled simply, Evans, Maxwell, confidential, sealed 1994. As she skimmed the pages, her hands began to shake. Max Evans entered state custody at age 11 after a fire destroyed his foster home. No surviving parents. One child fatality. Ethan. James 9. Fire ruled suspicious, cause never confirmed. Witness statements missing. File sealed by court order. She scrolled further. A report. One sentence circled in red. Max Evans was found wandering the blocks away, barefoot, carrying a melted toy fire truck. Victoria closed the file, breath ragged. This wasn't just about trauma. This was about guilt. She needed answers. But Maxwell wasn't talking. So she went to someone who would. 2 days later, in a grungy diner off 145th Street, she met him. Leon Barrett, now retired janitor. Leon had once been the night supervisor at the foster home. Victoria found him through a survivor's message board. He recognized the name Max Evans instantly. "I never forgot that boy," Leon said, stirring cold coffee. "Quiet, dangerous, smart. He kept to himself except with Ethan. Those two were like magnets." "What happened?" she asked. Leon stared at his reflection in the tabletop. "It was the night after his birthday. Ethan gave Max a homemade book of comic strips. Max didn't even say thank you. That night, we smelled smoke. It moved fast. Ethan didn't make it out." Victoria leaned in. "Do you think Max set the fire?" Leon looked up, haunted. "I think Max blames himself, which might be worse." Meanwhile, Maxwell stood alone in the penthouse, staring at the wall where Zoe had once taped up her crayon drawings. A crooked sun, a house for kids, and a man with gray hair and no smile. Below the drawing, Zoe had scribbled in blocky red letters, "This is our family. We don't need to be perfect. Just real." Maxwell sank into a chair. Real. He couldn't remember the last thing in his life that had been real. He thought of Ethan, the smoke, the way his lungs had burned before the world went black, the memory he'd spent years burying, rewriting, silencing, and now for children had unearthed it without even trying. Victoria returned that night, eyes wide, voice low. "I found Leon Barrett." Maxwell didn't look at her. "He remembers the fire," she continued. He thinks you didn't start it, but you never told anyone your side of it." "Why?" He turned slowly. "Because it doesn't matter," he said. "I survived. Ethan didn't. I got out. He burned. That's the end of the story." "No, Max, that's the beginning." He turned away again. "They don't want me." Victoria stepped forward, held out Daniel's notebook. It had been tucked in the hallway closet, left behind during their escape. On the last page was a poem, written in Daniel's handwriting. "You built walls to keep fire out, but locked yourself in instead. You tried to parent like a soldier, but forgot to kneel beside our bed. We didn't need a perfect savior, just a man who didn't leave. The boy you buried still in there, and he still needs to grieve." Maxwell sank into the chair, the words flooding over him like water against glass. Daniel wasn't writing about him. Daniel was writing for him. And in that moment, Maxwell Grant, the billionaire, the empire builder, the man who buried his past under steel and glass, began to cry. Not a corporate silence, not a dignified sigh, but a broken, shaking, human cry. Just before midnight, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. One sentence. "You want to find us. Come back to where you started." Maxwell stared. He knew exactly where they were. The ruins of the old foster home, the ashes of his past, and maybe, just maybe, the hope of his future. The roads twisted like memories, narrow, cracked, forgotten by time. Maxwell hadn't driven himself in decades, but tonight, he refused the driver, the entourage, the armor. He needed to go alone. The foster home was gone. It had burned to the ground 37 years ago. What remained was only what trauma chooses to preserve. Fragments, the bones of a building, and the whispers left behind in soot and silence. The headlights cut through the mist as he turned onto the gravel drive. His heart was loud in his chest too, loud for a man who once negotiated billion-dollar mergers without blinking. But this was different. This wasn't business. This was reckoning. He stepped out of the car. The structure ahead was more skeleton than shelter-crumbling stone, rusted beams. Half swallowed by ivy, the air still carried the faint scent of smoke. Like time had never moved on from that night. Rain started to fall, soft and slow, as if the sky itself were mourning something unspoken. And then he saw them. The children. Zoe was perched on a stone ledge, legs swinging like she owned the world. Ava stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Malik sat cross-legged in the dirt, sketching something onto a piece of cardboard. Daniel, of course, stood front and center waiting. "You came," he said. Maxwell's throat tightened. "You said to come where it started." Daniel nodded. "Because this is where you buried him." Maxwell took a slow step forward. "You know about Ethan. We know more than that," Ava said sharply. "We found the files. The court records. The sealed reports." Zoe pointed to the ruins. "This place isn't just where a boy died. It's where you were erased." Daniel stepped closer, pulling something from his backpack, a small metal object. Melted and misshapen, a toy fire truck. Maxwell staggered. "I found it in the rubble behind the old tree," Daniel said. "It wasn't in the police reports. But it's real." "I thought I left it behind," Maxwell whispered. "I thought maybe I made it up." Malik spoke softly, not looking up. "I draw what I feel. I kept drawing this place before I ever saw it. The fire, the hallway, the man with the broken watch who locked the door." Maxwell froze. "What did you say?" Malik's eyes met his. "There was someone else that night. You didn't start the fire, Mr. Grant. You weren't alone." Maxwell's mind reeled. That memory, his last from that night, had always been fragmented. The smell of gasoline, Ethan's voice calling his name, a shadow by the door. And then, the flames. What if the fire wasn't an accident? Ava said. What if it was meant to cover something up? Daniel handed him the notebook. On the last page was a hand-drawn map schematics of the old building. But one area was circled. The basement. A door, long sealed shut. Maxwell looked at them. "Why did you come here?" Zoe answered, voice low. "To find out what kind of man you really are." They descended into the basement with flashlights. The door was still there, half buried in dirt and rubble. Maxwell pried it open with trembling hands. It creaked like a scream. Inside, they found remnants of an old storage room, filing cabinets, scorched mattresses, and something else. A lockbox, half melted, wedged behind a beam. Maxwell cracked it open. Inside were dozens of documents, sealed in plastic, case files, abuse reports, letters written by children, some from Ethan, some from him, letters that had never been delivered, never acknowledged, letters that described a man named Wallace Griggs, the former director of the foster home, a man who was under investigation for assault and neglect, a man who vanished days after the fire. Maxwell staggered back. "It wasn't me," he whispered. "I didn't kill Ethan. I wasn't a monster." "No," Daniel said quietly, "you were just the one they blamed." Back outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds broke. Maxwell sat in the dirt, soaked, hollowed out by the truth. All these years, he'd lived with a lie carved into his bones. All these years, he believed he wasn't worthy of love, of forgiveness, of fatherhood. And yet here they were, for children, unwanted by everyone else. For mirrors of his past, standing before him now, not out of obligation, but out of choice. "I failed you," Maxwell said. Daniel shook his head. "You failed yourself, but you didn't fail him." Maxwell looked down. In his hand was Ethan's last letter, *, Max, if we ever get out of here, I hope we can live in a house with windows, real ones, and no locks on the doors. I think you'd make a good big brother if someone gave you the chance. *, I believe in you. Maxwell closed his eyes, tears falling freely. "I couldn't save him," he whispered. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "But you can save us." The news broke like thunder over a quiet sea. At first, it was a whisper, a single anonymous report posted online under a burner name. It claimed Grant Enterprises had quietly donated millions to an off-the-books renovation project at the Riverdale home for children. No press release, no photo ops, Just silent checks, signed and sent. Then came the video. It was shaky, filmed by a curious groundskeeper, showing for kids barely teenagers emerging from the ruins of the old Riverdale site, with flashlights and evidence bags. Daniel's voice, unmistakably calm and focused, said on camera, "We're not here to expose what happened. We're here to finish what someone tried to erase." By noon, the footage had gone viral. By evening, news vans lined the street outside Grant Enterprises Tower, but Maxwell wasn't inside. He was standing in front of the Riverdale ruins, now roped off, cordoned by authorities. Behind him, the four children stood like pillars: Daniel, Ava, Zoe, and Malik. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were architects of something new. "Are you ready?" Daniel asked. Maxwell looked at the microphone in his hand. He hadn't held one in months, not since resigning from his position at Grant Enterprises. He cleared his throat, voice roughened by truth. "I built skyscrapers," he began. "I built companies. I built wealth. But I never built a home. These kids, they've done what I couldn't. They've taken the broken pieces of their past and mine and built something the world needs to see." He stepped aside. Ava took the mic. Her voice was cold fire. The truth was hidden. "A man named Wallace Griggs ran this place for over 20 years. He abused dozens of kids. Records show complaints were buried. Investigations vanished. We found them. We'll release everything." Zoe continued, "The system failed us. But that doesn't mean we have to keep failing each other." Malik held up one of his sketches. It was of the new Riverdale. Clean lines, open spaces, a place where no door could be locked from the outside. Daniel's turn. "We're starting something called the Ashes Project, a nonprofit built on what burned down, funded by the truth, led by kids no one wanted. We'll rebuild Riverdale not just as a shelter, but a prototype for the future." The press exploded. Questions flew. Who's funding this? What does Mr. Grant have to do with it? Are the children legally allowed to? Maxwell raised a hand. "They're not just allowed," he said. "They're leading it. I'm not their boss. I'm their student." The backlash was instant and fierce. Some called it performative philanthropy. Others accused Maxwell of orchestrating a redemption arc to recover his reputation. Stock in Grant Enterprises fluctuated wildly, but that didn't stop what came next. Overnight, the Ashes Project website launched and crashed from too many visitors. Donations poured in from around the globe, letters, emails, testimonies, thousands of former foster children began to share their own stories. Some were painful, some were terrifying. One in particular stood out. "I remember Wallace Griggs. He locked me in a closet for 3 days when I was 7. I thought I'd die there. I never told anyone, until now." The next morning, Griggs' name trended worldwide. An arrest warrant was issued before noon. And the kids, they didn't wait. They began designing the first pilot home. Not a replica of Riverdale, but something altogether different. Technology enhanced, therapy integrated, co-designed with psychologists and former foster kids. Malik's sketches became blueprints. Ava negotiated with state officials. Zoe launched the social media campaign that caught the attention of celebrities and senators alike. Daniel, he organized survivor circle safe spaces for kids to finally be heard. Maxwell watched it unfold in awe. He had spent a lifetime building walls. These kids were building bridges. One evening, in the quiet of their temporary HQ, Maxwell stood beside Daniel watching the new plans being laid out. "Why are you doing all this?" Maxwell asked. Daniel didn't look up. "Because someone has to, and because you showed up when no one else did." Maxwell swallowed hard. "I thought I adopted for kids." Daniel finally turned to him, smiling faintly. "No, Mr. Grant, you adopted a revolution." Outside the window, the city shimmered in the night. Somewhere, the old tower still stood, a monument to power. But here, in this smaller room, with these for extraordinary children, something infinitely more powerful had taken root. Not empire, legacy. 2 months after the launch of the Ashes Project, headlines hailed it as the future of foster care. The first site had broken ground in Brooklyn. The team was meeting with senators. Maxwell had never imagined this would be the legacy tied to his name. Not boardrooms, not wealth, not towers in Dubai, but this. The kids were no longer just the children he adopted. They were the leaders of a movement. Ava had already testified before the New York State Legislature. Zoe had turned their story into a global campaign with hashtag From Ashes We Rise. Malik's blueprints had been accepted into urban planning programs. At Columbia, and Daniel quiet, steady. Daniel was holding the entire machine together, his vision clearer than anyone's. But then came the email. It was unsigned, no subject, just a file attachment. Victoria found it while combing through press inquiries. She almost deleted it until she noticed the file name, Original Fire Report, Riverdale.pdf. She clicked. What she saw made her blood run cold. At the same time, Ava received a package, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside was a burned piece of wood, old, charred, carved into it, barely visible. You know what you did. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't told anyone, not even the others. But she remembered that piece of wood. It was from the attic door, the night Riverdale burned down. Zoe found her Instagram hacked. Every post on the Ashes Project page was replaced with a single image. An old black and white photo of Riverdale's front steps, for children. Barely. Toddlers. Dirty. Scared. Holding hands. They were the original survivors. But the caption was the part that shattered her. The fire wasn't an accident. Ask the ones you follow. Victoria burst into Maxwell's office. He hadn't seen her this shaken in 20 years. Max, she said breathlessly, holding up a printed copy of the report. You need to read this. Now. He scanned it. The report was from the original fire investigation, but it had been sealed, suppressed. Where did you get this? No idea, Victoria said, but look at the witness statement. Page 3. He turned the page and froze. I saw someone come out of the attic window before the flames spread. A teenage girl. Red hair. She was holding a matchbox. I told. The police. They never came back. Maxwell's jaw tightened. Red hair. Ava. A meeting was called that night. Private. No media. No advisors. Just Maxwell and the for kids. The air was thick. I need to ask something, Maxwell said. His voice was heavier than they'd ever heard it. I need the truth. Ava looked up. Her eyes were hollow. You got the email. Who else knew? Zoe asked, panicked. That photo on the Instagram, where did it come from? It's not a photo, Daniel said. It's a warning. They all turned to him. What do you mean? Malik asked. Daniel stood slowly. His face was unreadable. I've known for a long time. I didn't say anything because I didn't want it to be true. Zoe whispered. What are you talking about? Daniel reached into his backpack. He pulled out a crumpled envelope. This was in my locker the day we moved into the Ashes Project HQ. No return address, just a note. She lied. We know. And this, he placed an old photograph on the table, was inside. The photo showed a younger Ava, maybe 13, standing in the attic window of the old Riverdale building. Behind her flames. Ava's face turned white. That's not what it looks like. Maxwell didn't blink. Then tell us what it is. Ava's lips trembled. I didn't set the fire, I swear, but I know who did. Silence. Thick, unforgiving. It was my brother, she whispered. My twin. Zoe's eyes widened. You never said you had a twin, because he died that night. Or so I thought. Ava looked at Maxwell. They blamed me, the staff. They said I was always the angry one. But it was him. I tried to stop him. That's why I was in the attic. But when the fire spread, he didn't come out. I thought he was gone. Daniel stared at her. He's not. Everyone froze. I think he's the one sending the messages. Daniel continued. The Instagram photo, the burned wood. He's alive. And he's watching. Malik whispered. Why now? Maxwell's voice dropped to a near growl. Because we're building something powerful, and someone wants it destroyed. Ava's eyes flooded. If my brother's alive, and he's behind this, then he knows everything. He'll burn it all again. Just like last time. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, but inside the room, something deeper was unraveling. Trust. Legacy. Truth.